their computer speakers. Everyone who is calling in will be placed in listen-only mode. Closed captioning will also be available for today's training. Like I said earlier, my name is Anna McGovern, and I will be your host for today. I am the Wellness Education Coordinator at RollCap. I work with the ACA Teen Ambassadors as well as the Growing Up Tobacco Free in Alaska projects to ensure Alaska's children remain tobacco free. Our presenter today is Amy Modig. Amy is a longtime advocate for sobriety and trauma free living. At RollCap, she provides villages training on managing Division of Juvenile Justice Awards as well as other community development work. Today's webinar will be recorded and made available on the Resource Basket website. All of our previous online trainings are archived at www.resourcebasket.org. Points of view or opinions expressed in this webinar are those of the presenters and do not necessarily represent the official position or policies of the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention or the U.S. Department of Justice. Additionally, at the end of this presentation, you will be asked to fill out a brief online survey. So let's take a second and we will get acquainted with our platform here. So you can interact with one another as well as the presenters in a couple of different ways. One way to let us know if we're talking too fast or if we are not loud enough is to use the little figure up top there. It's a person with his hand raised. So if you go click on the arrow, you can either raise your hand, agree, disagree, let us know to speak louder, speak softer, or slow down if we are talking too quickly. Also, we have on the bottom middle of the screen is a chat box, so feel free to say hello or just if you have any questions, insert in the chat box there. We will monitor the chat box throughout the presentation. So if you are joining us online and you are viewing as a group at the computer, go ahead and type in the chat box how many of you there are and where you're from. And if you are watching by yourself, just write a quick hello and let us know where you're from so that way we can get to know everybody. All right. There's a couple people tuning in from RollCap, some from Fairbanks. A couple people from Kenaitze and Kenai. Hi, Frank. Awesome. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Amy.
Okay, thank you, Anna. I can't hear in my microphone, so I just want to make sure as a microphone check, people can hear me. I'm so glad. So, so good afternoon. So please let me know if I talk too fast or don't talk loud enough. I know that there are some issues that people have. But as Anna said, I work here at RollCap. I've worked here for about 10 years, and but the longest I've worked is with the Rural Providers Conference, and I've worked there for 33 years on that. And I've traveled to about 130 communities in Alaska. So the title of this webinar is Introduction to ACEs, Becoming Trauma Informed in Alaska. And I first heard about this study in 2013 when I worked in the Growing Up Tobacco Free program. And I found out about the link between trauma in childhood and smoking as an adult. So please, like Anna said, feel free to ask questions in the chat box, and we'll try to stay on top of this. And copies of this PowerPoint are available on this platform. So let's get started. I'm learning how to do webinars now. I can't change this. Oh, this arrow. Okay. So ACEs is the acronym for Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And when you see the three caps, ACE with a small s, it stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And the study was a collaboration between the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the Kaiser Permanente's Health Appraisal Clinic in San Diego. And this started with Dr. Falidi And they ran a obesity clinic there in the Kaiser Permanente Health Clinic, and they had a really great obesity clinic, and people were just losing lots of weight. But what started happening was that people started dropping out. You know, they were achieving their goals, but then, or achieving, you know, progress, but they were dropping out before they achieved their goals. And after about 3 or 4 years, they decided that they would ask personal interviews, face-to-face interviews of the people that had dropped out. Most of them were women, and he tells in his story that he made a mistake in asking this one woman, instead of asking her how old were you when you first had a sexual experience, he asked her how much did she weigh, and she blurted out 40 pounds. And she was and he was so shocked. He said, "What? This is just this." And so then they found out that that was a common experience with a lot of the people that were in this obesity clinic. And so they devised some questions, and then they worked with the CDC with Dr. Bob Anda, and they devised this survey. And they had volunteers. They had 17,000 people there at Kaiser Patients who volunteered to be part of the study. And this they conducted it from 1995 to 1997. And so the ACE study findings, but to go back to Dr. Filiti, when he first found out how prevalent this experience was with his obese patients, he went home and he cried. He just felt so bad that this was a fairly common experience. And that kind of drove his energy to be part of this work, you know, with the CDC. But the ACE study findings suggest that certain experiences in childhood are major risk factors for leading causes of illness and death, as well as poor quality of life in the United States as adults. So, so with the questions that they devised, there are 10 types of childhood trauma measured in the ACE study, and 5 are personal. There's physical, sexual, and verbal emotional abuse, and then neglect, that's physical and emotional. And then the other 5 are within your family, like mental health, mental illness in the household, substance abuse in the household, witnessing domestic violence, separation or divorce, or abandonment sometimes, and then a household member in prison. And of course, there are many other types of childhood trauma, like homelessness or severe accidents and war, etc. But the ACE study only included these 10 childhood traumas because those were mentioned as most common by a group of about 300 Kaiser members who were researched. Joanne? So the ACE score calculation, when you take the 10 questionnaire survey, is they use a scoring method to determine the dose of each study participant's exposure to childhood trauma. Experiencing one category of ACE qualifies as one ACE. When the points are added up, the ACE score is determined. An ACE score of 0 would mean that a person reported no exposure of any of the categories. But you can go to acestoohigh.com and you can find out what your ACE score is. But they suggest that you always follow up and use the resiliency score afterwards, so that you won't, feel down if you have a lot of ACEs. That you can figure out, how you've overcome, and you're on a positive life there. And it's most important to remember that the ACE score is meant as a guideline. If you experience other types of stress, that could increase your risk of health consequences. So the findings from the ACE study is the first research was published in 1998, and since then, over 70 CDC publications have been released. Hundreds of other clinics, though, and universities and health centers continually do research. So what they found in general is that childhood trauma is common, even in employed, white, middle class, college educated people with great health insurance. Those were the 17,000 people at the Kaiser Permanente. There is a direct link between childhood trauma and adult onset of chronic diseases such as heart disease, depression, obesity, and other autoimmune disorders. So, and then ACEs also figured in people who became violent as adults or became a victim of violence, as well as in rates of alcoholism and use of tobacco. And so, in this next slide, we have the pyramid of adverse childhood experiences. And so you see this, it's called the mechanisms by which adverse childhood experiences influence health and well being throughout the lifespan. And you see that it goes from um, conception to death. But the base of the pyramid is occurrence of adverse childhood experiences. And the level of the trauma and duration can determine how much the neurodevelopment is disrupted. That's the second level of the pyramid. And this lays the foundation for social, emotional, and cognitive impairment. And this is what shows up with children who go to school who have traumatic lives at home. They have problems learning, getting along with others, handling problem emotions like anger, fear, or hurt feelings. And then, in order to handle this social anxiety, emotional pain, or confusion, youth adults, in this next pyramid spot, is that they can adopt health risk behaviors like alcohol abuse, drug use, unsafe sex practices, or things like unsafe practices like fast driving in vehicles. And that can lead to the almost to the top of the pyramid disease, disability, social problems. This includes obesity, diabetes, addiction, heart problems, etc. And then at the top of the pyramid, some studies show that the presence of ACEs can cause the loss of 20 years of life. Oh, wait. And then, so you see on the pyramid, there's an arrow that goes up on the left, and that's the epigenetic genetic mechanisms. Undisrupted development has regular genetic development, but hunger, violence, or deprivation can change the genetic development, and these experiences can change an individual's genes. This is one way intergenerational transmission occurs. The other way is that many adults with ACEs in their background, some do not find ways to heal or cope with their uncomfortable feelings, and they can bring their children to a situation that is close to what they experienced as children: alcohol or drug use, divorce, poverty, or turmoil. And then in this next slide, excuse me, we're having a pause for technical updates.
Hi, everyone. Sorry to interrupt. So we are trying to figure out the slides on our end, but I think for right now, if you go ahead and utilize the arrows on the bottom of the PowerPoint screen, you can move the slides manually if they are not moving for you. We're trying to figure out on our end over here, but right now I think we are on the slide with
I'm going to move it forward to
um,
adverse childhood experiences on the brain.
yep. So the slide we're currently on will be adverse childhood experiences on the brain, and it has a little graphic with an arrow on it. If you are not on that page yet, sorry, Amy.
Thank you, Anna. And so this graphic shows this traumatic event occurs and having a prolonged alarm reaction and then resulting in altered neural systems. So that it tries to show how childhood trauma injures the child's brain. And so this chronic stress can damage neural pathways. And this is so dangerous because children can adapt quickly to an environment of chaos, unpredictability, threat, and distress. They go numb or they get hypervigilant, and they may grow up feeling this as normal as an adult. And these children have trouble adapting to the order of a classroom, playground, or other people's homes that may last into adult life. They might have trouble following rules, showing up at work on time, those kinds of things. So with Alaska Natives, there are three kinds of trauma that are common. Um, Historical trauma, and that's where we have the history of disease and plague. We've had a loss of language, dance, and history. Whoops, sorry, where am I? I'm backing up for the, oh, here we go. Okay, sorry, I got lost here in the, um, so, loss of language, genocide, boarding schools. Why is this slide changing? So we're back to the historical trauma, and it's racism and loss of land, loss of connection. Okay, here we are. And there's also with this, I don't know what's happening with our slides that they're jumping around so much, but I'm trying to stay on three kinds of trauma for Alaska Natives. And so in the middle one, the middle column, the NTHC, through their epidemiology department, they collect data on Alaska Natives. And they found that 28% of Alaska Natives have 4 or more ACEs. They found that 41% of Alaska Natives lived with someone with a substance abuse problem. And just as a reminder, in our general population, we have 14.8% Alaska Natives in our population. And then in the final column is post-traumatic stress disorder. And the National Center for Biotechnology and Information found that Alaska Natives and American Indians experience high rates of trauma and PTSD. Alaska Natives and American Indians have a substantially greater burden of PTSD than U.S. whites. And besides combat, interpersonal violence is a major factor. So to get further, understanding about traumatic stress and its progression, we know that basic stress is normal, and it can energize to deal with a lot of important things. It's actually like good stress. It can help you meet your daily challenges and motivate you to reach your goals. And in fact, stress can help you accomplish tasks more efficiently and even boost memory. But the beginning of bad stress is a feeling of being overwhelmed, of maybe if I move the arrow, is it away from that? It won't hit worried or run down. And then it goes into chronic stress that persists over time. We have dancing slides here. Okay. What is going on here? Okay. But I'm here at traumatic stress. So should I not touch these arrows here? Don't touch them. I'm gonna unplug my mouse. I have a happy mouse here. Okay. So back to the chronic stress, but or you can ignore your stress symptoms to have chronic stress. But chronic stress leads to physical inflammation like acid stomach, heart and organ discomfort. And then chronic inflammation leads to heart disease, cancer, diabetes, stroke, kidney disease, and brain disorders. And this documentation comes through the Science Daily. They keep track of all kinds of studies that are happening around the nation. And so this Dr. Kanal over at the UAA, she's a tobacco researcher, and she told the Bethel Group that she was watching several research studies that were studying the link between chronic inflammation and cancer. And one of the things that tobacco is known for are sores in the mouth, smoker's cough, COPD. all of which have early symptoms of inflammation somewhere in the system. And so now the transition to becoming trauma aware is that in our mainstream society, trauma, was seen as unpleasant, for sure, but a fairly common experience. It was almost like people were saying to each other, everyone suffered. What makes you so special? Just get over it. But even our elders, but an elder in Nome told her adult grandchildren in the 1980s, do not hurt the children because it will cause problems when they are grown up. And so even our elders knew it was a bad thing to hurt children. But that information, was lost, with all the big changes that happened, or it was ignored. So, that they knew that there was a link there. But with it'd be, but the post-traumatic stress disorder, even though it was known about in World War One, as shell shock, it wasn't until 1980 that it became recognized as a treatable issue, and it was put into the DSM-3. And just for your information, we're on DSM-5 now. But the other portion was that that historical trauma was finally shared by Maria Yellowhorse Braveheart in the mid 1980s, and she based her research on Jewish Holocaust, the Japanese American internment camps, their survivors and descendants, as well as her own Lakota experience and history. And then the final one was the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, because that brought together many diverse groups who had this shared childhood experience. But there's still a widely held belief, or one of the areas that's getting attention now is bullying and how very serious it is. In surveys, they're finding that as much as 50% of all children are bullied, and 10% are bullied continually. And there's this widely held belief that kids will be kids can be cruel, but many of us working in this want to make this behavior unacceptable. And so now, after the ACEs study, we have scientific proof that many of us have suffered. And this has led to this movement to not want to traumatize or re-traumatize another human being. And this is how we developed trauma-informed care and practices. And the DSM stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and that's like the go-to manual for psychiatrists and psychologists to determine what determines mental health disorders. Thank you for that question. So then, all of these efforts there helped us to learn about the effects of trauma. And we're all learning as a nation. Some people faster than others because some fields are, deal directly with youth. But the recognition of the effects of trauma have resulted in these basic points. There are many types of trauma, and people need support and understanding. There are no groups of people exempt from trauma. Every race, every socioeconomic level, every age, and educational level have been affected. Trauma hurts the individual, families, and communities, and disrupts healthy development. People can be educated on the impact of trauma on coworkers, clients, friends, family, and even themselves. People can learn understanding, empathy, and compassion, even as children. And so SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, developed the points of a trauma-informed approach. And they said a program, or organization, or system that is trauma-informed has these practices. They realize the widespread impact of trauma. They recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma in clients, families, staff, and others. They respond by fully integrating knowledge about trauma into policies, procedures, and practices. And they seek to actively resist re-traumatization. And so the next slide is that the SAMHSA's 6 key principles to the trauma-informed approach in an organization are having safety and having trustworthiness and transparency, having peer support, having collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice and choice, and recognize the importance of cultural, historical, and gender issues, and recognizing the healing value of cultural connections. So, after this trauma, look, once known what can be done, and this is called, this is a stage of awareness. But now we're getting into the action part. But back up. So, once known what can be done, like Paper Tigers is a documentary that happened. It's called One High School's Unlikely Success Story. It came out in 2015. It's now available on DVD, and you can order it, online. And then the next documentary is called Resilience: The Biology of Stress and the Science of Hope. And that one looks at people working with children and helping them break the cycle of adversity. But both these, are going through mainstream society and letting everyone know that there's trauma-informed practices and they have a profound impact on the young people. It is so moving to see Paper Tigers and watch those young kids struggle in the beginning, tossing chairs in the hall, and then later on learning how to recognize triggers for rage and anger or grief and sadness. It's a very moving movie if you get to see that one. But with Resilience, you do have to get a private showing with some of the organizations that are showing it now. It's not available. And then the acesconnection.com, it's a social network that involves the all of as many activities that are going around, not only just in the United States, but all over the world. And they want to help heal and develop resiliency. And there are hundreds of trauma-informed care programs in schools, prisons, clinics that work to prevent trauma and re-trauma of children, clients, families, and communities. You can find that under SAMHSA. And one in particular in Florida, the state government has a policy for a paradigm shift, which is the first time I've ever heard, of a state government actually saying we want a paradigm shift. That they want to do trauma-informed practices for all their inmates, beginning with the juveniles. But that started with finding out that their women that were in prison had been terribly, terribly abused as children. And they made a commitment to not traumatize these women again, like through strip searches or shouting in their faces, or being rough. And they just did not want to re-traumatize them. And it was like a very compassionate response when you first find out, how prevalent this issue is. And so now we're getting to what is happening in Alaska. And the Alaska Children's Trust is kind of like a central point where they started a whole bunch of programs to help support. They want to prevent child abuse and neglect throughout Alaska. But they started the Alaska After School Network, which is a ROCAP partner. And they help Prevent Child Abuse Alaska and Strengthening Families program, and the Alaska Resilience Initiative. I'll talk about these further there. But the State of Alaska Strengthening Families is a strength-based approach to help families, and they try to teach about 5 protective factors for parental resilience, social connections, support, knowledge, and social and emotional competency for children. But we've had some, workshops. We had a webinar on this. If you want to see that, in our Resource Basket website. But the Alaska Resilience Initiative is a fairly new program out of the Alaska Children's Trust, and we were at a meeting in April 2016 where they brought together about 100 people from nonprofits, from private sectors, to tribal and government organizations. And they defined their goals as being to educate and help create dialogue in ACEs, the impact on brain development, and how to help communities prevent ACEs and build resilience resilience. And there are so many initiatives around Alaska. And you can find this information at the Alaska Children's Trust again, the ACES initiative. And Trevor Stohr runs the Alaska Children's Trust, and Laura Norton Cruz runs the Alaska Resilience Initiative. And so the many dynamic efforts that are happening in Alaska are documented at the Department of Health and Social Services, especially at the Advisory Board on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse website. And Patrick Sidmore is the man that helps collect all the data, and he produces these publications. And one of them is, the cost of ACEs, on our state government and our state budget. And then what's really exciting to me is that our school districts around the state are interested in this topic, and they've done, some information workshops to Dillingham, to Fairbanks, and Juneau, just to name a few. But they all want to develop these trauma-informed practices. But the most exciting part is that, at the meeting we had a principal, Marcus Wilson, who talked about working with the North Star Elementary School, and he said that his students had improved their grades, their test scores, and they had improved their attendance, and that it was just an incredible experience. Well, he's running now the Anchorage School District Educational Center, and he's helping. He's going around the state, to work with these different school districts. But and he's helping these other schools. We have about 5 or 6 schools now that have implemented trauma-informed practices. But the most exciting part is that there will be a district-wide training that will occur with all principals in 2017 in August, the end of summer here. And then 4 more schools will start their trauma-informed practices in the fall. And the changing policies and activities that we're seeing, are happening up here in Alaska, but they're happening nationwide. And the health clinics and health practitioners, they have training for doctors, nurses, and others on ACEs. They've devised screening tools for childhood trauma. And there's one, up in the Matsu borough that has a screening tool at the clinic there, trying to find out if there's any childhood trauma with their patients that they're seeing. They help better understand, their health history. And there's all kinds of research on the links between trauma and adult health problems. And then, forming these trauma-informed classrooms, creating a safe space, establishing predictability, building a sense of trust, offering choices, and staying regulated. But one of the key things that they have is that they don't want to punish the kids for behaviors that are trauma symptoms. So now we're getting to the resources, a site that is continually updated with hundreds and hundreds of pieces of information from around the country, from Alaska. We had an article there with Lisa Wade out of Chickaloon. That is just very fascinating. But that's aces2high.com, and that's where you can get your ACEs test or take your ACEs questionnaire. But I mentioned the speaker is Marcus Wilson at the Anchorage School District Educational Center. And he gave permission to provide his email, as did all the people that are listed here. And he will go anywhere, he will go, travel to any place to tell people about ACEs. And then Laura Norton Cruz, she works over at the Alaska Resilience Initiative, and there's her email. And she is a dynamo, and she's really passionate about, about this issue. And so is Debbie Bach, and she's an ACEs trainer. And Debbie and I got to see the Paper Tiger showing when they had it in November 2015, and we both were just so moved and really encouraging each other to get involved, and she's doing this training. And the training that I mentioned at the school district happening in August is, she'll be a trainer at that, and so will Dora, and then Marcus Wilson is the one that's coordinating the whole thing. But I also wanted to mention that Linda Chamberlain, she came over here to the Resource Basket with our advisory board and gave us a training on the impact of ACEs on brain development, especially with adolescents. But she is so brilliant that she got a Fulbright scholarship and she went to Finland to join this international group to do this research. Um, and I'm looking forward to any kinds of reports that come out from that. And I mentioned Patrick Sidmore, but he also spoke here at ROCAP twice, and or yeah, and then with the statewide tobacco effort. But in closing, I'd like to say these these last points to highlight. Having ACEs in one's childhood is, even if it's a high number, is not a blueprint for the future. And the question is, what is wrong with you? The question is, what happened? Shaming and punishing re traumatizes children and adults. Resiliency can be learned. And then, because of the adversity, and this is what a 16-year-old told her therapist, because of the adversity I faced in childhood, there's nothing I can't do. And that's kind of the goal that we're hoping that we can have with our young people, is they won't be trapped, in their pain and confusion, but that they can face their futures with confidence, once they understand. And that's what the healing process is that you become aware, you understand, and then you share. And that's, and if you have ACEs in your background, you become aware of them and you understand, how it happened and what impact it has on you. But then you tell your story to some other human being, either a friend or a therapist or a counselor or a sponsor, but you share that story. And this is an extraordinary field that is only like 20 years ago and is based on research. This is not very long. None of this information is like 100 years. But we also have to remember that there are many people who have worked decades in this field, trying to prevent child abuse, and working with traumatized victims. And there are warriors, like Diane Payne, who knew full well the impact of childhood trauma on adult life. And they're just glad that there are many more people who know and willing to teach the many more who still don't know. And especially people who can transform their lives if they only knew. And then we hope that we can prevent our children having any more ACEs than they do now. And, from this day forward, and this is like all the passionate, power that Laura Norton Cruz and Debbie Bach and Limber Chamberlain, from this day forward, no more. And so, and then our resource basket contacts, we're at the website resourcebasket.org. The staff that we have is Tara Stiller, community development manager, and Greg and Elon, community education coordinator, and Amy Modig, community wellness coordinator. And in doing this webinar, I learned so much. It is an exacting process with lots of complex pieces. And I want to thank, Joel Turman for coming in here and, saving us, helping us, navigate this Adobe Connect. But I also want to thank Anna McGovern for helping us throughout this and for being such an able host. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Amy, for all the knowledge you shared with us. ACEs is definitely a topic that is becoming more widely talked about across the country as well as in Alaska, and is very relevant for many of us in our work and lives. So thank you so much for spreading the knowledge with us. And so we have some time left. So if anyone has any questions or comments, you can go ahead and put it in the chat there. We do have a question from Clara. Does trauma cause nightmares? And Amy, I don't know if you want to come back on the mic and want to answer a couple questions. I know I just told
Can you hear me now? Hello? So Yes, definitely. Yeah, trauma can inform, nightmares. That's a common feature with post-traumatic stress disorder also, but also childhood trauma.
Can people hear me? Okay. Okay. Um, so if nobody has any other questions, or if you have any questions that pop up afterwards, feel free to get in touch with any of the Resource Basket team that's listed here. Okay, so available here is the PDF version of the presentation, and you can go ahead and click and download that right off of your screen there. Um, Additionally, the presentation will be available on the Resource Basket website within the next week. So if you couldn't stay for the entire presentation, you can find that on at resourcebasket.org. We also ask that you take a minute to answer a brief survey about this presentation. You will be directed to these questions as you exit the webinar. Your feedback is very much appreciated and helps the Resource Basket team determine what types of presentations and webinars to offer in the future. So the Resource Basket hosts the Supporting Youth webinar series. The website is not on there, but we will type it in the chat box in a couple minutes. And on the Resource Basket website, you can see recordings of our previous webinars, including the one about strengthening families that Amy had mentioned. That is available on the website, as well as upcoming trainings, webinars, and scholarship funding opportunities. So on behalf of the Resource Basket, thank you so much for being with us and have a great rest of your day.